Gonville & Caius College, Cambridge, late autumn 2019. 40 years after it welcomed women through its doors, we're meeting Cians past and present to talk about some of the most important issues facing women today.
I was lucky enough to do a day's work shadowing when I was about 16 with a very senior police woman, and I thought she was fantastic. So I went up to uni thinking maybe I would like to be a police officer.
Tor Garnett is a police officer, a detective superintendent in the Met in London. She was at Caius between 2004 and 2007 and studied natural sciences. Christina Ostacchini is a flight lieutenant in the RAF.
I was at Caius between 2012 and 2015 and I studied history. No, I'm in a car and sort of just between RAF Lossiemouth and the beach. Although you can't quite see the beach from here.
That is in the far north of Scotland.
Hi.
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 Okay, I think we're all back on now.
Tor Garnett is at home in London preparing for a night shift. They spoke on the phone about public service, their time in uniform and their time at Caius, starting with how the Freshers' Fair changed Christina's life dramatically.
I think I settled in really quickly. I was one of the unlucky people that fell into the trap of picking up a free t-shirt from the boat club in Freshers' Week and accidentally ended up rowing my entire time, and by the end of it was doing 12 sessions a week with the university lightweight boat. So I kind of found my niche. Gosh. Yeah, I sort of found my niche in sport, which was something that I had never done at school. How about you? Did you have sort of clubs that you found straight away, or did it take a bit of time?
So I rowed in my first term, and then just before, I think, is it called Fairburns? The race at the end of the first term. I found myself sitting in one of the baths in Harvey Court, having a bath, crying because of the blisters on my hands, being like, I hate this. I am not ever doing this again after tomorrow. So I did one unsuccessful term of rowing and then gave that up. But exactly as you said, so much sort of opportunity to just try new things and be like, ooh, maybe I'll be a rower, or maybe I'll be like a knitter, or somebody who likes folk music, or somebody who debates. Suddenly, all of these opportunities open up. And I found that actually quite a bit overwhelming, but also in the end, how I realised what I actually do like, because every term I'd end up doing the same sort of thing, mainly kind of college-based community stuff, and would end each term being like, next term I'll get into the red wine drinking set who'll talk about politics. Next term, that's I'm sure who I'm meant to be. And after 9 terms, I was like, no, what I really enjoy talking about is who left the lid off the Marmite and why this shower water pressure isn't what it should be, etc. So you've come to terms with who you are.
Yeah, I kept having dreams of occasionally, I'll just sack in rowing and I can have blister-free hands and I won't have to wake up at 5 a.m. You describe it to some people and they say that sounds awful, but my alarm would go off just before 5 and I'd sort of go down through the college courtyard, especially when I was a third year and I was living within the old building. You'd go down the spiral staircase and you'd go unlock your bike and it would be all sort of misty and frozen, and you'd cycle down the cobbled streets and go to Ely, and then you'd get in a boat with the best friends you'll ever have. And I don't say that lightly, but there's something about waking up at 5 a.m. and all rowing together for each other that does mean you're going to make the best friends ever. And it was a very, very special experience. And I think I wouldn't change all the blisters for the world. It's a bit cheesy. I just really like rowing. Also, were you involved in the JCR a lot?
I ended up becoming the first year rep in my first year for the JCR committee. So then a couple of years later, I then went for the JCR president role and on a campaign of Vote Tor, Get More. And my competitor was Michael Gilhooly, Don't Be Fooly, Vote Gilhooly. So I was incredibly thrilled to win and then had a very happy year as the JCR president. I just loved college life. I'd loved the same at my secondary school, and we introduced the wedding, which was as a new fresher, you obviously get college parents. And so the summer before that starts, at the end of exams, we'd have a wedding in which all the women would buy like brides' dresses off charity shops, and all the men would wear ridiculous suits. And then we'd all have hall, and the dean at the time was a really good egg, and she would then do a fake marriage service for us.
Wait, so, sorry, there wasn't a college wedding before your time? Because we still have college, or back in, it was only 5-6 years ago, but we definitely still had college weddings, and we'd all find the sort of the cheapest white dress we could get from Primark and go and sort of...
I invented it. Or
that's
my
amazing.
year of the JCR invented it. It was very amusing that first year. People thought we were insane, but I think it's hilarious.
Oh, now that's a tradition. It really does feel like, it feels like home. I think whenever I go back to visit Cambridge, and as soon as you step in and you see Tree Court and then you go through to the Gate of Honour, and it does feel like your home, doesn't it? And yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of your subject lecturers, what were they like, and were there any ones that sort of particularly stood out to you or were really helpful for you?
Okay. So I was lucky to do natural sciences, which is a great course because you actually do quite a mix of things. So in the first year I did maths and physics and chemistry, and me and my friend Rich, who'd come from the Welsh Valleys, had supervisions in like physics with Dr. Butcher, who was right at the top of a long tower in Old Court, and was fairly terrifying but also great. And very quickly, certainly for me, it started to go well over my head as we got into like relativity and things. So for my second year I ended up specialising in chemistry and material science, and then my third year material science. So now I loved the study. I mean, it was hardcore. I probably worked like 9 to 5 certainly Monday to Friday, probably Monday to Saturday sometimes. And always that thing of working quite hard the first 2 terms and then working really hard the third term as you revised for the exams. And I remember Professor Liang, who I loved at Keys, who would do all his supervision on very old school fax paper that would have like all the little dots on the side, obviously from like, I don't know, 1902. And he was brilliant and so patient, and yeah, just fascinating and so satisfying to really, I guess lots of people who come have been pretty good at their subject at their school, and then you get in the mix and you're by no means the like best of the best. You're just in this pool of people, all of whom are smart and are able to work and are interested to learn. So it was such a stimulating experience. What about you?
Yeah, so I think I suppose it can be an advantage in history is that all the supervisions are one-on-one, so you have absolutely no point of reference unless you take people at their word when they tell you they're doing terribly or they're doing really well, for example. So I had no point of reference in terms of where I was in the year, how it was all going. It was more just, it's going fine, and for the most part, I was really enjoying it. And I think it's probably, you get it with all subjects in Cambridge, but you do get a range of eccentric approaches to having supervisions. So I definitely had I had one supervisor from a different college in my first year who sort of specialised in 18th century politics, who didn't seem bound by this whole hour-long supervision time. So I remember at one point sort of catching a sneaky glance at my watch and realising it had been 2.5 hours. And he would get really into it, and he'd be pacing up and down the room telling you about court and country politics and the emergence of the Whigs and the Tories and everything. And sometimes, the sunlight would fall on you in just the right way and you'd be on a sofa and it would be just a struggle, honestly, to stay awake. But other times, it's such a privilege to have that. And to know that this was probably the person who knew the most about what he was talking about. And he thought it was worth his while to spend 3 hours of his day telling you about it. And I think that's honestly one of the most brilliant things about Cambridge. And I still love history. I still try to study it almost as an amateur. I use a lot of the online journal articles, especially when it relates to things that are going on in the world at the moment. And if you really want to understand something, you know, looking at Russian revisionist history, for example, about World War II, but I am just at my core a history nerd, so I'm not too ashamed of that.
I think the most I manage now is like a Sudoku now and again, but yeah. How did the RAF and that whole world become an option for you? What made you think that you'd love to do that?
So it was a kind of chain of events. Firstly, I joined the Air Cadets when I was 14 years old, mainly because I went to an all-girls school and I kind of wanted to do something a bit more interesting and maybe not all girls in my spare time. And I mostly just joined the Air Cadets because they looked smart and a load of them played musical instruments in a marching band, and I played musical instruments at the time and thought, oh, that'll be cool. And one thing led to another. We did a lot of visits to RAF bases, and the more I saw of it, the more interesting it seemed to me. So by the time I was 16, I was fairly certain that I wanted to join the RAF. But I kind of carried on doing the youth groups and joined the University Air Squadron once I got to Keys. By the end of that, I put my formal application in my third year and was pretty much set and on my way and into initial officer training less than 3 months after graduating.
Wow.
Tor, was there anything you did police related, like while you were in sixth form or while you were in Keys?
So no, I didn't do anything police related. Oh, actually, I did some more work experience filing the traffic points of police officers who'd like driven the car the wrong way. One of my university summers, but no, I didn't do a whole load of policing things. But I just was clear that I wanted to do public service, and I think the other thing that when you go to Cambridge, you, a bit as you said, you get much more into the work than maybe you thought you might. And so I think everybody really does think a bit about, gosh, maybe I'll be an academic. But by the time I got to third year and things were getting really hard in terms of the work, I was also like, oh, I really want a job that you begin and you end and then you have a weekend or whatever. As it turned out, policing isn't really like that at all, and it's on your mind quite a lot. But no, I ended up applying for Teach First, for the Met, and for the NHS management scheme, actually. Okay. And it's so interesting to hear that from 14 you were involved in the Air Cadets, because I think that is quite an formative moment of what you think would be fun and fascinating. And so having done that work experience when I was younger, I was pretty certain, oh my gosh, I'd be stabbed or it would all be a nightmare and I can't run and I'm scared of the dark and all kinds of things that make you inappropriate to be a police officer. But I'd talked to quite a lot of people and said, oh, maybe I'd do that. I then thought, right, come on, you got to go for it. So yeah, and I started in East London in Hackney, going to 999 calls for 18 months, which was in itself fascinating because you are such an immersion for your 3 years in Cambridge in one sort of side of your brain. And then arrived and did actually a very different side of my brain in a whole new world that I'd never really seen deprivation like it or understood the kind of chaos that is created around addiction or poverty or trauma. So it was very, very eye-opening for me. Did you find the same? If you went so quickly, just 3 months from graduating into the RAF, was it quite a mind-blowing experience of, wow, this is very different to what I've been doing for the last 3 years? Or the discipline of rowing and the cadet work at uni meant it was quite a seamless transition? I
mean, in some senses it was quite a natural transition. So I think there were a couple of funny moments where our instructors were doing the military thing where they say, oh, you're not students anymore, you can't lie in till 10 a.m. And I was thinking, when I was a student, I was waking up at 5 a.m. every morning and working harder than this. And we were doing PT sessions every day on weekdays. And I was like, oh, only 5 training sessions a week? Are you sure you haven't missed some out? And there's also getting used to the fact that I suppose military instructors aren't actually like your Cambridge supervisors. So if you write them a 1,000-word essay about how they've got varying standards when they inspect your rooms, and how could we ever expect to learn if they're changing their room inspection pass standards all the time, it doesn't end well. So so I think I've learnt a few things there just about adapting to the non-Cambridge world.
I think that's so interesting. I think at Caius and at Cambridge, no one gets defensive really over challenge. They kind of love that. They love the sort of intellectual argument and a difference of opinion, and you're so encouraged to think for yourself and have a view that is different to other people's views. I agree. I think coming out in your early 20s then into the working world, not as many environments are as open or able to be challenged in that way. I think that's really
I definitely remember having written in my report that I had a tendency to overthink. I thought that's kind of what I do. I don't know if it could be overthinking or if it's just a regular Cambridge level of, I've thought this, therefore.
Yeah, a criticism of being over analytical. It's like, that's what one's been rewarded for up until this point. Yeah.
How did you find, what was the training like to become a police officer and the application process as well?
Interesting. So the application process was quite formulaic, understandably, because they are, recruiting at volume and there's got to be a process. And the training I found, I was very lucky actually and had some great trainers, but I found it quite slow and I found moments of it quite frustrating. And interestingly, since then, me and a mate in the Met set up something called Police Now, which is basically exactly like Teach First, is built for grads who have got lots of job opportunities and could go and do anything and might never have considered the police. And if we say, we'll get back to you in 18 weeks, and you say, actually, I've just had an offer from Goldman Sachs and I've got to tell them by Tuesday, then, it's a nightmare if we turn around and be like, we can't go any faster than that. So we ended up, with the support, in fact, of the great HR director in the Met, trying out a whole new way to recruit graduates into policing. And it doesn't pay you any different, or it doesn't give you any privileges, but it puts you right on the very front line as a neighbourhood officer, which is one of the toughest roles in terms of trying to drive down crime and up people's confidence in you in a tight community. And we would go from sort of application to offer in 6 weeks. And we'd, in learning from the Teach First models, start the summer training academy in July, and rather than train in 18 weeks, which is what I did, we'd train in 6 weeks, very high intensity. And it's been a roaring success. It's now just recruiting its 6th cohort, and all kinds of phenomenal people have come into the Met, and now I think we're across 25 or something forces right across Britain. And that's something that, I remember when I went to the careers days at Cambridge, and there was like an officer from the local constabulary, and I was like, I'd quite like to apply to London. And they were like, well, that's not us, that's someone else. And you were just like, oh gosh, this feels so complicated compared to like HSBC and Linklaters and everybody else handing out like free pens and being incredibly welcoming that that's the career you wanted to. So I guess in some ways my application process and training was a real big impetus to say, why do lots of my peers not consider policing at all? And yet law or banking is a really obvious option for them. And how can we change that? Because maybe the same for you. I've found it the most fascinating, brilliant, rewarding profession ever. And I so want more and more people to come. And even if they only come for 2 years and then go off and do something else, I think it's such an eye-opening experience and opportunity to contribute and develop your ability to lead and things like that. So yeah, it was, I love it. Feel so lucky to have had a clear vocation for policing.
And I think as well, when you're applying to sort of public service jobs as well, and it's that versus, you could join this shiny accountancy firm and we could get you all these qualifications. It's the fulfillment and the interest that you get from the work itself that's drawing people in. And I think sometimes we just need to shout a bit louder about that. I think it's that desire to like give something back or make a difference, even if it is very small. Although in your case, sort of doing the whole Police Now thing sounds pretty amazing.
No, but I think you're absolutely right. I think we don't sell enough how fascinating and how challenging public service is. And I think it's great that what I love about policing is it's such a diverse workforce. People have come from so many different backgrounds and walks of life and ages and stages. And what's lovely about that is it's a real leveler, and you enter it with humility. The people I learnt from in those first 2 years were phenomenal. They weren't graduates necessarily. Some of them were, some of them weren't, but they were just great communicators and great with people and great problem solvers. And it was so refreshing, I suppose, because Cambridge and Keys can be a bit of a bubble. And I think a lot about, to those too much has been given, much is expected. If you've had the good fortune to have a opportunity to study at Cambridge, you need to go out in the world and absolutely make the difference and serve and do the best you can for this world. And I feel like policing and the RAF must be the same, is a place that you can do that every day. You are able to serve and make the difference, and it keeps you on your toes. Like, there is definitely stuff about Cambridge that helps me in my current job, but equally, I've had to learn a huge amount. It doesn't prepare you for all kinds of other aspects of life or challenges that you kind of deal with professionally. So what is your kind of day-to-day routine like? What's the bits that you find most fascinating, and what's the bits you find most challenging?
So a lot of what I do is operation support to aircrew flying squadrons. So at the moment I'm working with the Poseidon P8, which is a maritime patrol aircraft. So that's looking at the whole naval world of submarines and surface vessels, and it's something I knew literally nothing about at the start of my tour. So I could with confidence tell you what a submarine was and what a maybe what a frigate or a destroyer was. Every day I'm kind of learning new things, and you're talking to people who've been doing the job for sort of 30 odd years, and they're absolutely full of incredible knowledge. And some of it, these aren't people that have had necessarily formal scientific education, but the level of learning that they're coming out with is well beyond. I mean, I only did sort of GCSE level science, A level maths, but it gets pretty high.
So what does a day-to-day look like? Are you kind of poring over documents, or are you like project managing changes, or what does it look like that you do?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much poring over lots of documents, going through lots of different resources really to pull out the things that the crews need to know and digest them, stick them into a presentable format, normally a PowerPoint, and give a brief in sort of the best and most succinct way I can. So I kind of think of my job as being a sort of information filter to enable people to do their jobs to the best of their abilities. And Cambridge, definitely studying history really helped, because if you can get a sort of a 20-book reading list and distill it into a 2,000-word essay in a week, then that's really the kind of skill you need to be able to pull information from all the different sources and put it into like a 20-minute PowerPoint.
How interesting, yeah.
How about you?
So this week I'm working night duty, and I'm the on-call superintendent for South London. So that means that between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. I'm the senior officer across right the way from like Heathrow all the way over to Bromley, so southwest to southeast London. And basically I will be at one of the South London police stations all night, and I will mainly take lots of phone calls from various investigators or duty officers who are running response teams that go to 999 calls about the stuff that is very high risk or that they need a superintendent's authority. So, for example, last night we had a number of missing people who were suicidal, and so you are racing against time to try and find them and get them to safety before they harm themselves. Or you've got a chase that's happened and somebody's discarded a lot of drugs and there's been an arrest, and they're now trying to work that case through very quickly in order to try and charge that individual. Or you are signing off and scrutinising a firearms warrant for a piece of intelligence that's come in to say that somebody's got a gun, and how might we recover that gun and arrest them and prosecute them successfully. So real varied different jobs come into you and you're trying to do your best in the middle of the night to sort of support people and give good advice and make good decisions about what's a proportionate kind of course of action to manage the risk. So that at the moment is my week. So, Christina, what's it like being a woman working your way up in the RAF?
So I've actually found there's been it's not really like a huge deal particularly. So, for example, on my officer training course, we were about 20 to 25% women. On the flip side, that was considered a very female-heavy course, and at the point where 1 in 5 people is female, that's actually not particularly balanced. But in terms of overall military perception, like that's quite considered to be quite a lot of women. I think it really does vary on your workplace. Like there's definitely sort of where I work at the moment, just because of the area that it is and the people they've got there, I will often stand up and I am the only woman in a room. Or while I was on an out of area last year and I was embedded in a coalition headquarters, sometimes I kind of look around and I was not only the only woman in the room, but I was also the youngest and the only junior officer and the only British person. And so that was quite intimidating, but I just kind of sat there and hoped no one realised I didn't know what I was talking about. But I haven't found there's been any like real issues in being taken credibly at all. And part of me does wonder as well if there's a little bit of the Cambridge magic that kind of works its way there, because often if I'll chat to senior officers I'm briefing and they find out, oh, you went to Cambridge, which college, what do you study? And it shouldn't be like that, but sometimes there is a sense of, oh, she probably knows what she's talking about. Maybe we'll pay attention to her for a bit. Not that they wouldn't otherwise, it's just that extra aura of, credibility, really. How about you?
Yeah. I think that's right. I think that actually the woman label, the Cambridge label is a stronger label as the woman label, as is many, many other labels that everyone has depending on their varied backgrounds. So I haven't found being a woman at all a thing, really. It is very diverse. There's a huge amount of women. My last job in counter-terrorism, all my 5 bosses, all above me, were all female. And I think there've been 1 or 2 moments of like, ooh, gosh, I seem to be in a minority here, but much rarer. And interestingly, in the Met, 1 in 5 sergeants is a woman, 1 in 4 inspectors, and 1 in 3 superintendents. So in fact, as you get more senior, you end up spending more time with female peers. And, quite a lot of meetings in the last 3 or 4 years have been very much a minority of men in the meeting. So I think things are changing very, very quickly in policing, and police now has 55% entry is women. So it's a female majority. And I think what I found more is sometimes a different response to the work that we do. So, there's huge pressure, there's huge responsibility, there's a lot of trauma. My response to that is tears, which is a very female response, whereas the more male response is often anger. And, my tears are often because I'm angry. But, I think that's interesting, and working in increasingly female cultures, doing what could be perceived to be a more male profession when dealing with crisis or aggression or things like that. And I find that fascinating about what does my own leadership behaviours look like in the face of trauma and people who are managing trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think just anecdotally, when I've been in situations where perhaps we've seen things that might impact us for whatever reason, I was lucky enough, my boss at the time was a female wing commander who was also a fast jet pilot, which is, again, not completely out of the ordinary, but the sort of fast jet aircrew world is still very heavily male dominated. And the way she kind of dealt with it was, and it might not have been because she was a woman, but perhaps she was able to come across as much more understanding and much more, I suppose, aware of all the responses you might have to it, and just kind of be able to talk to people in a way that made you really know that the people in command were sort of had your backs.
I think that's totally right. And I think it's so lovely to be in more an increasingly female culture in this work in order to see other role models of how people manage in tough situations. I totally agree. And so what do you want to do in the next, where do you think things are going to end up in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
So for myself personally, I would like to keep being in the RAF. I think because we change jobs sort of every 2 to 3 years, there's always something interesting going on and there's always somewhere else that you can find yourself. In terms of the broader RAF, I can only see it getting, more diverse and encouraging people from a much wider range of backgrounds in, and that'll include more women. As well as that, we've just had the first female RAF regiment gunner accepted and passed through training. And that was the single role in the RAF that wasn't open to women when all the others were. So that was a pretty groundbreaking landmark case. And I just, it's not one of those things, you don't expect every single woman to want to be a regiment gunner because not every man wants to be a regiment gunner. But at the same time, the fact that we've opened that up and it shouldn't become unusual for, a teenage girl to turn around and say, actually, I want to do that and I can do that. Which is pretty encouraging because no one should ever feel like that's not an option. In terms of the number of young boys that you talk to who are like, yeah, I want to fly fast jets. But there's not that many young girls at the moment that say that. And I can't see many reasons for that other than cultural gender stereotypes. And that's pretty sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where do you see yourself in the sort of 5, 10, 15 years?
I think I'm with you. I think it's a really hard question to kind of project forward 5, 10, 15 years. I think, though, that I feel as well that definitely the police is fascinating enough and large enough. And as you say, moving every 2 or 3 years roles means that for the next 30 years, I feel very clear that it will be able to hold my enthusiasm and fascination and attention. I think personally, as people move into family life and all those kind of things, I also feel like we are on the cusp of starting that revolution around flexible working and job sharing and all those things, which has been more challenging in shift work type organisations. So I don't quite know what it will look like, but I really hope to be wrestling with the problems that we wrestle with now and finding some good solutions to them when it comes to how do you reduce crime and how do you cope with intergenerational trauma and how do you help the public to feel safe. So those are the questions that one's been answering for 12 years and I'm no doubt will continue to be the thing for the next 30 that as crime changes we'll want to keep getting better and better and better at. So I feel I did a business secondment about 18 months ago, which was interesting, but was really helpful to be like, actually, the grass is not greener at all. And we are an incredibly progressive, diverse profession. And I feel very kind of proud to be a police officer.
I was going to say, in an ideal world, if we push forward 15 years, neither of us would have much of a job to do, but I think unfortunately that's probably not the world we live in.
If there was no crime and no war, exactly, we'd be fine. Yes, ideally we'll be unemployed in 15 years, but we'll see.
I'll become a history teacher.
Christina Ostacchini and Tor Garnett. This is the last in the first season of For the Love of Learning podcast from Caius College, Cambridge. But before we go, one more memory from a speech made at a garden party held to mark 40 years of women at the college. This time, a story about change from Amanda Pinto, who was in the first cohort of women to attend Caius in 1979.
Nothing really has changed, I think, in those 40 years, apart from communications. I thought I'd just share with you, with thanks to my friend Tanya, just a couple of ways that we used to communicate. We used to get yellow pieces of paper in our pigeonhole to tell us if we'd had a telephone call. And these are two of Tanya's. 12th of June 1983, for Miss T. Berman from Tim Bardwell. See you on Tuesday. I had a good sleep. in Harvey Court Garden. And just one other gem. 14th of March 1983 to Miss T. Berman from R. O'Connor. Please ring, I shan't give you the telephone number, if interested in something to your advantage. A wonderful word of instruction, I think one might say, to Miss T.K. Berman on a typed note from Gonville and Caius College. Can you please call me on Monday, November the 8th at 6:10 p.m. to rehearse saying grace, or else come in earlier to arrange another time. This is rather important. The result without rehearsal can be terrible. I think you'll agree nothing much has changed. We're all here to celebrate, even though it does mean confessing that we must be older than 40. So thank Caius very, very much for a wonderful education and a wonderful party.